replay, but no, I just started. Okay, so I welcome you. I have a lot of very good questions from users that I'm going to be answering today. So if you are on this webcast, I encourage you to ask your questions about 3D printing, 3D design, and really, any questions you have about the classes that we offer, or really just any way to have 3D printing help your business or hobbies. I always put in a plug for this. We are currently the #1 bestseller on Amazon for 3D printing books. So if you look for our book, which is published by Maker Media, the people that put on Maker Faire and Make Magazine, our book is entitled Getting Started with 3D Printing. It has a little apple that is sliced into layers on the cover, and that's a kind of a really cool thing that you could check out if you're kind of just starting into 3D printing and 3D design. So we have a few different questions this week that kind of range the gamut from mesh-based questions to solid-based questions, and I'll be going over those for sure. One from, actually a couple from Juliana, and one from a person that I didn't get their name, but I will be sure to answer all questions. Plus, again, for all of the people that are on this webinar, please ask your questions if you have any. Just a little tiny bit about us. Honeypoint 3D started about 3 years ago, and we are essentially a CAD file creation company. So we have half of our business, which is my side of the business, which is educating people about how to create CAD models themselves for 3D printing and for manufacturing. And then the other half of our business is business services around CAD file creation. So if you have a drawing or even just an idea in your head, we will create the CAD model for you and make sure that it can be injection molded or roto molded or whatever, and we help you that way. So we have two sides of our business that are both trying to help you get a CAD model to launch your business or improve your life, or just generally be more creative for whatever goals you have. So let me kind of start in with one of the questions that I got. So this was the unnamed question. I should really put in a name thing on my form, but this question was about working with 3D models that you might download from Thingiverse, or generally working with a model that was created in a CAD program. And the specific question was, this person quite often has holes that they want to put in boxes, and then sometimes the holes don't work and they want to move where those are. So I'll kind of show you some of the pitfalls that happen with that and how to fix that. So let me screen share here and share my screen. Yes. And share my screen like this. And now we go like this. I have Fusion up, but let's actually go here. See my little dragon in the background there. Okay, so let's start off with this one. Bring up Mesh Mixer here. So this would be something kind of similar to what you would find online, where if we press W for wireframe, move it up here, W for wireframe, you see that this is a very simplistic model, and was created in a CAD program. So if we try to do anything like hitting this with a sculpt tool, this thing gets very, very messy very, very quickly. Obviously it's kind of cool actually, but not what we're looking for. So the way to start off with any of these things is you need more geometry. If you have to do this in Mesh Mixer, the way to do this is to hit the Select tool up here, which brings up the Select window. And if you click and drag on things, you can select things, but I'm going to hit Control A to select the entire model. And then I'm going to go to Edit to Remesh. And it'll, it might remesh it in a weird way, but I'm going to switch this to linear subdivision up here. And I'm going to turn the density all the way up. So now you can see we start to have more and more triangles in this model. I'm going to click Accept. And you can say preserve, actually you don't even need to say preserve sharp edges, because linear subdivision essentially takes all of the triangles that were there before and then just subdivides those triangles into more. So this is kind of a non-destructive type of remeshing. I'm going to click accept. This isn't really enough for me. I just maybe want to have more, so I can go to edit to remesh again and linear subdivision, all the way. Now it gets a lot more complex. Now these do have some kind of changes in density right here left over from the model, but now that we have a lot of different triangles inside of here, we could go to edit to remesh again if we wanted to. I can click cancel if it's taking too long, but now I could go to something like adaptive or relative density. Let's see what adaptive does. That's all right. So now we can say preserve sharp edges right here. It takes a little bit longer time, but now we have sharp edges and a much more regular mesh. I'm going to clear the selection. Nice sharp edges, but a more regular mesh. So now if we happen to hit this with some sort of sculpt tool, the sculpt tool, well, kind of a little bit much there, but the sculpt tool will have a kind of a normal sort of thing happening here, like that. So let's undo all of these. There. So now what if we want to move this hole? So there's a couple different ways to do this. Now one good way is if you don't know what size the hole is, you can go to the Analysis, to the Measure tab. And one of the things here is, should be this guy right here. And so this one says, from the outside of the mesh, measure until you hit some other part of the mesh. So if we go down and kind of zoom in here and click, you can see that this red line is going across this hole, and you can see that pretty regularly this is about 34.8. When I created this, I didn't create it very accurately, but let's just say that this is 35 millimeters. So we know that we have a 35 millimeter hole. Now there's a couple ways of doing it. Now if you want to get rid of this hole, what you can do is you click on select, and if you just kind of click and select, you can select the triangles in here, but you have to be really careful, and if you're not careful, it can spill over. So the way to do that is when you click select, you can switch the expand mode to crease angle, and then turn this crease angle up. So now, as long as my little red dot under my mouse is on this angle, even if my mouse kind of starts to spill over, it won't spill over that edge unless my arrow happens to spill over, and then it will. And so what I can do is I can even make my mouse super, super huge, but it will only apply to the crease angle. So if I click, it selected the entire inside of that, but it didn't go outside that crease angle because it didn't violate the crease angle. So I can now hit delete. Blam. We now have two very, very nice holes where with the select tool selected, I can just double click real close to that blue and press F for fill. That's nicely filled, and I could do the same thing for the other side. Fill. So a nice kind of patch there. If I turn off wireframe, you can't even tell that a hole was there. So there's some ways that we can get another hole, but a really, really good one is actually the stamp tool. So if we click on stamp, I'll turn wireframe back on. We have some existing shapes that we could use, but let's just go to this circle. I'm going to click on this circle, and now as I click and drag on the mesh, you can see that I'm creating a circle. And if you, actually, let me escape this so that you can see my full window here, because you will need to see the right side of my window. There we go. So let me undo that. So now we'll click on stamp again and click on the circle. And now as I click and drag, you can see on the right side of my window that some numbers are popping up. So 8 If we go up to what it was, 35 before, you see that's probably too big. This is radius, right? So a 35 radius would actually be 70 diameter, and the other one was about 35 diameter. So let's go to about 17.5, around that. So then we let go. Now, it just kind of looks like a circle right there. If I press space and I switch the color to group mode, we can see that we have created a circle right there. So what we can do with this is in select mode, so I clicked on select, I can double click on this and do all sorts of things. I can hit D. I can extrude this out if I want, like that. I could extrude it down if I want to try to cut a hole as like that. All sorts of things. So, or even if I delete, I can create a hole like that and then extrude it downward. So this just creates a hole in the mesh like this. It doesn't give me a hole on the other side, but if I was just trying to create a hole like this, I could. So that's one way, kind of an interesting way with the stamp tool. Let me undo that. Another really good way to create a hole, though, is by going to Mesh Mix, and this is a cylinder. So I can click and drag this cylinder just into empty space here, and it creates a cylinder. If I look over here, it gives me sizes. I can just say, I want this to be 35, and it will make it a uniform 35. And this is probably a little bit too short, so what I can do is just scale it in one dimension here. Great. And click Accept. Now I have two objects right here, and I can hit the T key to transform it and move it wherever I want to cut a hole. Now I would select my original object and my second, and I would say Boolean difference. And we have a nice, awesome hole right here. And you can play around with the refine settings and all of that, but you've cut. And actually, I kind of forgot to mention one thing with my previous example, so let me go back. So certainly that mesh mixing is very, very useful for very accurate. But if we go back to the stamp tool, I just totally blanked on this. If I create something that is, let's say, about 17.6 or 17.5 here, and then I go and create another one that is 17.5 here, you see these two things are face groups. They're different colors. So if I go into the select tool and double click on this, and double click on this, I can use a tool, if I find it in here. I can never find this. Under Edit to Tube Handle. Tube Handle works. No, did not like that. And now it's gone. This works when I tried it. Let me try this again. So let me replace. Not entirely sure where this went. Anyway, so the tube handle should work if we bring in, let me try to bring in a bunny. It does not like any of this. That is very weird. But in a very general way, let me very quickly do this just so that I can show you, because I really do want to show you the tube handle command. It is not used that often. There we go. And then one more time, remesh with adaptive. Good enough. All right. So, you select one place, you select another, and let's see if this works this time. We go to Edit to Tube Handle, and the tube handle will cut a hole based on two selections on two sides. So in this case, if we did a stamp with a very known diameter here and a stamp with a very known diameter here, and double-click select, and go Edit Tube Handle, that crashed. I don't know, that's weird. But anyway, it should work, and I'm not entirely sure why. That's another way of doing it. So hopefully, let me go back and Stop sharing my screen. Hopefully that kind of gives you some good examples on how to cut holes very accurately. Certainly the mesh mixing one where you bring in a cylinder of a very specific size is a good one. So hopefully that answered your question, unnamed person. So now we have another couple questions from Juliana, who had a couple questions on scan cleanup and texture painting and all of that. So actually, let me click on my email here so I get her question very specifically. Let me look at this. Okay, so let me share my screen again. Share my screen, share, and share. Okay, so Julian had a couple questions, and one was about aligning objects. So these are, actually, let me bring up these first. Bring them over here. So these are three different objects, or actually the same object, just scanned from different places. That's one side, that's another side, and that's another side. And how to properly align those so that you can mesh them together. So let's go in here, actually. Bring this up. All right. So let's just move these into different places like this. Okay. So we have three different pieces. It looks like these two objects are from, there we go, are from the same side. And this one object is from the other, and how to align them. To me, it looks like this object is kind of better than this one, so maybe I'll just kind of work on these to start off with. But there's a really cool thing called align to target. So what we're going to do is we're going to select one of these two objects as kind of our reference model, like the one we want to align to. So I'm going to select maybe this one. And we're going to hit the little magnet right down here and say, this is the target. It kind of turns all ghostly. It says that this is the target. Now we're going to take this one, which is the existing one, and we're going to roughly align it ourselves. So I'm going to look from the top, kind of like that, hit the T key, and very roughly align this like that, and then maybe look from the side, kind of roughly align it like that, maybe down a little bit more, kind of roughly, and that looks pretty good. So what align to target does is you would hit the select key or select button, and you would select some spaces that exist on both objects. So if we turn off visibility of this one, and even turn off the magnet, we can see that on our reference object, the inside of this is pretty well scanned. I'm talking about like this area inside of here. All of this is good, but really nothing on this side. All right, so let's just remember that. I'm going to turn on target back and bring in this guy. All right, so on this one, we have a little bits up here. We can see a lot of silver down here. That's great. Some silver up here. So what I'm going to do is hit the select key, or select button, and I'm going to select on this mesh. I'm going to select here. I'm selecting places that are common to both objects. Select on this side, and then maybe down here. And then we go to Edit to Align to Target. So what that'll do is it'll try to match your selected area and suck it down towards where the other object is. I'm going to turn up the solve iterations all the way, and I'm going to have no error tolerance and say improve. All right, pretty good. So now I'm going to click on accept. And now let's turn off the magnet of this and kind of look at what was created. Turn on the other object here and kind of look at what was created. Now you see we get some of this, which is pretty good actually, which means that they're overlapping a tiny bit. And you can kind of see that up here, you see that they're pretty much coplanar, which is what you want. You want these models where they have similar geometry to overlap. Now, you can also see that it maybe not be quite right on the side here. So, we can always take one of the objects now that it's kind of aligned and move it a little bit. Move it out here very, very slightly. So the aligned to target sometimes will get it perfect, but sometimes won't, and you do a little bit of manual. Now you see that this mesh is interspersing here really, really well. Interspersing here a bit on this side, that's really, really nice right there. And you would click accept. Now, you would need to do some cleanup on the objects, right? So where they overlap, you see that there's a nice part here on this one, and also a bit here. If you would want to maybe make this parting line right down the middle, so you might have to do some deletion, but you certainly could do that work. If you were really feeling adventurous, you could select both of these and then hit combine to combine them, and then see maybe what Make Solid would do. It might even crash Mesh Mixer, who knows, or it might take a long time to do. But there's a lot of weird things, so I have no idea what Mesh Mixer is going to do with this. But if you're feeling extremely adventurous, you could always try to run the Make Solid command and see what that tool does. Sometimes it's absolute magic what it does, and then sometimes it crashes Mesh Mixer. But we could maybe see. That's very interesting. That was just fast. We would set this to maybe accurate with a better accuracy. Might actually take some time to do that, but you have actually not that much time. You have something that is a lot more accurate than you had before. If you accepted this, you would obviously have a lot of things to clean up, like all of this and all of this, but it's maybe a little bit more than you had before, right? You could hit some of this with some of the sculpting and smoothing tools, and it looks pretty nice. And this was just rough, right? This was just a Make Solid. Let me go back to stop sharing here. And that was pretty solid. Pretty quick. It wasn't. It didn't take a long time to do. If you were a lot more meticulous about how to mesh those things together, you certainly could. I'm good. I'm glad you're on the webinar, Juliana, and I'm glad that the align to target was working for you. An align to target works great, and then you do some cleanup with that. So, Juliana, let's get to your next question, which was about scan cleanup and fixing some colors. So this was actually an interesting model that you sent to me. So let me go and screen share again. Share, and share. Okay, so let's get out of this. And let's go to Juliana's scan cleanup here. So here is the model that Juliana provided. Let me bring it in here and move it up a bit. So a scan of somebody's face, and with the bottom cut off, and if we go into the X-ray shader, we see that this has been hollowed out. We also see some things inside. Maybe some numbers or some notes and things like that. So that could cause some issues later with doing various remeshing. So what we can always do is just go edit to separate shells, and then just keep the head shell with this, like that. There we go. So now all of those other ones are cleared out. So one of the issues with this is that she found that this becomes very dull when exported. So if we click the shader to this non-lit version, we can see that it looks pretty ashen, right? If we switch the shader to the lit shader, it looks a little bit nicer. But there's a lot of issues with this model. One, let me go here. We start to see like these little crusties right in the hair, and there's things going on with this model. If we click the wireframe, we see that this might need a couple runs, or a run of Make Solid with this to kind of fix this model. The problem is that Make Solid changes this from a texture to a vertex shader. So here is Actually, let me start this program. So what I did was I kind of wanted to investigate what was going on with this model. And then sometimes Mesh Mixer isn't the right tool for that. There are other tools out there. And it should be starting in the background if it's not. Yeah. And so what I did is I brought this into Remake. So let's load this model in Remake. Oh, 2 remakes. And see what the issue was. Now, Remake has a bit of Mesh Mixer inside of it, but it also has some other tools for mesh cleanup and all of that. So I just wanted to see what was going on. And we start to see that there are some big issues with the texture from this. I'm not sure what program this was created in, maybe PhotoScan or something, but there's some issues with this. And the way that I originally saw this was when she sent me this, I looked at this texture file. Let's open this up. And there is a lot of stuff in here. Obviously, this model was wearing a blue plaid shirt. But in Mesh Mixer, I saw, no problems right here. No blue anything. And it looks like that texture kind of came back. The cutting of this, whether it was cut in Mesh Mixer or whatever, did not delete those textures. Plus, Remake shows that those textures are in a bad place. So I am not going to give a demo on how to paint in some parts of, or fix this. But what I will do is I will show you, Juliana, how to fix the parts of the model you were concerned about. So like back here on the back of the ear, right? Obviously the scanner can't get in there, and so we can fix that texture. So let me show you how to do that on a better model. One that doesn't have weirdness going on with the texture. And for that, I am going to leave out of Mesh Mixer. This is not going to be. Let me just talk to you face to face a sec. I just saw PhotoScan to make the model. Yeah, so there's something wrong maybe with the texture from PhotoScan. It packed it into weird places. I don't know. So let me show you on a model that I made. I am not going to be using Mesh Mixer for this. I'm going to be using Blender. So Mesh Mixer is great. You can do a little bit of texture painting, but it's only vertex painting and not texture files. So it's only a kind of little bit more rough type of color. I want to preserve the textures and paint over them. So for this, I'm going to be using Blender. Blender is a free program that is the epitome of what I believe to be the best run open source project ever. I don't know if it's the best run, but it's just so many awesome things you can do with Blender. There's huge courses on Blender you could pay hundreds of dollars for. You can do so much. But let me show you how to work on texture painting in Blender, which is what I do for scans that have texture problems. So let me go back to screen share. Share. Okay, so I'm going to start Blender. And make sure that this is sized properly so that everybody can see it. Like this for the replay. Okay. When you first load up Blender, just as a caveat, go into user preferences. There's really some things that you need to change, like system. Let me move this down. If you have a fancy graphics card, you could change this to CUDA. But really important is under input. Most people select with the left mouse button. By default, it's right. And so most people get confused right off the fact that they're left clicking and nothing is doing anything. So input left is really good. Just as a note, I like the orbit style as trackball. And under interface, zoom to mouse position and rotate around selection are very nice. I turn those on. And again, that is under File to User Preferences right here. But I'm going to go here to File to Import and import an OBJ. It brings this up. I'm going to go to my desktop, Webinar, Juliana, Scan, clean up. So this was something that I created with my RTEX scanner. It should be immediately knowable to you what this is after it loads for a sec, but it's a shaver that I just bought at Costco. Now, it's not coming in with texture, so but texture is in there, so don't worry about that. Now, I'm going to do a couple things. First, there's this little like hash marks up here, these little like lines. I'm going to drag these out, which just gives me another viewport. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to drag that out first. Now, on this one on the left, I'm going to click on it so that it makes kind of an orange halo around it. And I'm going to switch object mode down here to texture paint. Now, it's just white, and you see up here it says kind of missing data, all of that. So the way to fix that, I'm going to go to slots right here and painting mode. I can even make this a little bit bigger for people. Painting mode, I'm going to say image. And then I'm going to click on the little image right here and say RTEX shaver. Boom. And now we have an awesome RTEX scanned shaver. All right, so you can see, this whole thing. Very nice scan, wet and dry up here. Great. I'm holding down Shift and middle mouse button to pan, and then just hold down middle mouse button to rotate. So that's great. We have our textured shaver, but you notice that there's some blue out here. There is definitely not any blue on the head of this shaver. So this is what we're going to be fixing. We have another shaver over here, but I'm going to change this. So this little cube down here is kind of the view mode. I'm going to click on this and go to UV image editor, which is right down here, and click on that. So it brings up what's essentially the UV map right here. And I'm going to say view. I'm going to turn off draw texture paint UVs like that. Oops. And let me just do something for a sec here. All right. And if it doesn't show up for you, you can click on this little image right down here and select the RTEX shaver so that you're working on the image file. So this is the PNG file that's just attached to the shaver, just the image file. Great, so we are still in texture paint mode down here. We're going to go back up to tools. If you click on this big bubble up here, you have clone, fill, mask, smear, soften, texture, draw. I'm just going to say, I mean, really any of these would work. We could click masking. I'm just going to say texture, draw. Right, so let me do something like egregious right here. So I'm going to drag this down until I'm doing a red. There's different blend modes, all of that. But really, if you see my mouse right here, as I click and drag, I am actually creating red. Now, right now, look in the right pane. You don't see any change until I let go, and then boom, you see red appear in this texture. If I change this to yellow and painted yellow over here, it's now yellow. If I went like this and did yellow down the entire, shaver, yellow would appear all over in different parts of the texture map. I am actually changing the texture by doing this. And so you can go in and do all sorts of kind of cool things. You can draw, soften, smear colors. For something like this, I would probably just do the thing down to a black and go in and just start kind of going like this. And you can see I paint over once and it makes it a certain darkness, but it's not going any darker because my strength is only 0.7. If I let go and I click again, now I'm going darker. So that's kind of nice. It won't flood your model with color. You can kind of give it a couple chances to get something nice and dark. And something like that. You can do other things. And now you can do other nice things. Let me do like this. If you hit the S key, you can sample the color underneath your mouse. So you see if I hit S as in sample, now I've sampled a yellow. If I hit here, I've sampled a blue. Here I've sampled kind of a gray. So now I can start painting with a gray. The color doesn't change much. If I sample the blue, it certainly does change. So this is very, very useful for like right here where some blue came in. I sample right here, and then I can start kind of painting this over. You know, it's still a little bit too dark because of right where I sampled. And plus, you also have to see that this is kind of a shiny thing. But mostly this should be kind of a black, so I can sample on a black and start painting. But you can play around with this yourself. And this is saving out your texture. Now, something super, let me even go back and stop my screen share. Something really critical that will get you, and I have to say it and you have to pay attention because this gets people all over the place. Those changes that you're doing, if you went out to your OBJ and saved it out, would be lost. Because what you're doing is you're not editing the 3D model, you're editing the texture map, which is just the PNG file. It could be a PNG or a JPEG or anything. You're editing the picture. And when you save out the 3D model, the picture is not saved. So let me show you how to save that. Let me go back to screen share. Share. Back into Blender. So if you look right down here, you'll see image. There's a word that says image, and there's a little star next to it, which means the image has been edited and not saved. So you click on image, and you say save image. Boom. Like this. It'll think about it for a sec because this is kind of a big PNG. But now you see there's no star there. So you don't really even need to save out the 3D model because you haven't made any changes to the 3D model at all. You've just been editing this image file. You know, obviously, if you have made changes to the 3D geometry in this, you would go to File to Export OBJ and save it out. But really, when you're doing all of this texture painting, you know, with different colors and you know, different things like this, you're not editing the 3D model at all. You are editing this texture map. And you see the image has a star here. If I wanted to save this out, you can go as save image again and then do this. You can also go in. You notice that this is kind of messy. It came from Artec. It doesn't really matter when you're working on this, but one other way of doing this is, let me start this again and stop Blender, like that, is if we go into Scan Cleanup, Shaver, Artec, like this, and overwrite. You can bring this into Remake and save it out with rebaked textures. So you see all of my changes are in there. Let me go here, like this. And you can go to Export, right here, to Export Model. And you may need the professional version of this, or I'm not sure if you can with Quick Export. Let me see. Yeah, you can just say hi. If you have access to the advanced version, you can also go in and say rebake textures, which will make that texture map a lot more nice in order to edit. So that's kind of a trick you can use with that to rebake the textures and then export it. So let me go back out here, stop sharing. So hopefully that helps you, Juliana, understand how to do some texture painting. You could fix behind the ears. If you come in with a well-textured scan, I'm not sure if that scan that you had might need a little bit more fixing or not, but that's generally how you can do it. So for the last 10 minutes, I wanted to go into the other thing that I talked about, which was using 3D models for, or meshes for Fusion 360. And Juliana, yes, Blender is awesome, and thank you for the feedback. So I'm glad that that helps you, and hopefully you can make some good models with that. So let me just do a very quickly. We've gotten some questions in the past month about using meshes inside of Mesh Mixer and turning those into usable models. So I'm going to show you one way of doing that that's very useful, and it should actually be kind of a quick thing. Now, with a caveat, this may or may not work because Fusion is a partially cloud-based service, and Fusion has been down. I hazard to say maybe 24 hours now, and people are super upset. So hopefully this works. And but if there's some errors with Fusion, that's kind of what it is. Fusion does not go down that often, but this is a kind of a major outage today. So I don't know. We'll see what's going on. Let me share my screen again, like this, and get out of this and this. So let me go into Fusion. So this is Fusion. I'm going to go up here to insert a mesh, and let's just use that shaver that we had before. So scan, shaver, RTEC, and insert this. It might take a little while to insert because it's kind of it's a 57 megabyte mesh, but hopefully it doesn't take too long to come in. There we go. I'm just going to say, okay, if I click on the origin here, you know, it looks like it might not be coming in perfectly aligned. I can try to maybe just, I can center it for one, and click on the front up here to say, oh yeah, that's not the best rotated. Maybe let's make it easier like this. And then click on this to go from the side. Okay, pretty good. All right, so this is the shaver in here like this. Now what I can do is just click on Sketch and go to Mesh, Create Mesh Section. And it says which mesh body, like this. So now it gives me this little plane thing. So I'm going to turn this plane 100 or 90 degrees like this, and then maybe move it down somewhere around here. And if we look, this is creating a mesh section around here. And you'll kind of see what these look like in a second. I'm going to do this just a couple other times. Create mesh section again. Again, turn this 90 degrees. Sure, I'll do one right in the middle, and I'll do it one more time. Mesh section of this, 90 degrees, and I'll create one at the top here. Okay, and you see, you can't see because it's taking up too much of the screen, so let me move this here. Okay, so you see that as I did those three things, it created three sketches here at the bottom for the three mesh sections. So even right now, we can turn off this mesh body. We don't need that anymore, and I don't need the origin. So we have these three things. So what we do now is say Sketch, Mesh, Fit Curves to Mesh Section. So it asks which one you want to work on. I'll choose this bottom one first. And now we're looking at this. And bring this panel in. So it says Fit Curve Type. If I'm working with an enclosed curve, which this is enclosed, I could say that this is made out of a spline. Right? So if I kind of click on this and say spline, I get a perfect spline with a lot of like little jaggies on it and things like that. Not really what I want, because these jagged things in a spline just make havoc with the spline. So if I say 1, or if I actually cancel that and go back and do that again, if I go back into spline, close spline, and I say my fit tolerance, let's make this 1 millimeter. And I kind of hover my mouse over this and click OK. It created a really nice spline that pretty much matches this. So let's go in and turn off the mesh section. This is the spline that it created, a kind of a closed spline. I can click Stop Sketch, And I can turn this mesh section back on if I want and kind of see both of them here. This is the mesh section, but then this is the actual just Fusion spline. So let's go in with the, do this again. We click on Sketch to Mesh, Fit Curves to Mesh section. Click on this guy. And this is maybe a spline, but maybe I could say that this is an ellipse. Maybe select that. Nah, ellipse didn't really work. Let's cancel. Is it a circle? No, the circle really comes out. Let's cancel that. Maybe try closed spine, again with 1 millimeter of accuracy. Let's look and see. That's pretty good. You can see the blue spline going around. Click OK. So that's pretty good. Stop sketch. Now, this third one is going to be a problem. Sketch, Mesh, Create, Fit Curves to Mesh section on this one. So let's click on this one. We're kind of working on this up here. This is not going to work as a spline because you can kind of see that it goes around. And in general, we want, you see there's like weird things in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that this is a spline with a 1 millimeter fit. So we can just start clicking on this and say, I'm going to create a spline here. And then as you see me drag here, it's actually creating a spline that is matching to that. Now, as I drag it here, you can see that this spline is actually following this. Now, it'll kind of be weird up here. But what I can do is kind of click like that. And it's following this. And I don't really want it to follow right now. So I'm just kind of leave that out right now, and I'm going to click OK. That's a really nice spline curve right there. I'm going to do the same thing, the Fit Curves to Mesh section. And I could even say that this, down here is more of an arc. So I'm going to click right on this, and you can see that it's trying to create an arc around all of these. So if I maybe try to go somewhere over here, not the best arc. But that is actually kind of a good arc right here. So let me try to select that. And then we might have to go back to spline, but that's not going to be that good, right? So, there are some things that you can do with the mesh section. And then you can go sketch and just spline, create a normal spline, maybe from here to about here. And you can see I can kind of try to match what I think is right here. Great. With just a normal spline. And I go back to Mesh, Fit Curves to Mesh section. Yeah, probably just go back to spline here, and then continue off. So I'm going to select this point right here. And I might need to kind of, that's not entirely right on there, but, and see, I might need to say spline fit tolerance of 5. No, it's having some weirdness right there. So, you might have to kind of go a little bit slowly on all of these until you get kind of what you want. But that's a good one to go. And then sketch a spline here. You could just kind of go from here to here with a normal spline and then try to match that to the shaver. And then click on the handles for this. And kind of bring that in, something kind of like that. And click Stop Sketch, and we have a profile there. So if I get rid of all of these mesh sections, get rid of that, that, and that, we have 3 things. And we can do a create lofts, that one to that one. And then sometimes there are problems. I don't think that I closed up this one entirely well. So normally if I were doing this, I'd be a little bit more diligent. But, I can loft from that one. It looks like the problem was a little bit with the middle one. Oh, no, that's actually working. And this is the rough shape of the shaver, right? So we can go in and, model a holder for this or whatever, all based on these mesh sections, which we can look at like that. So pretty cool. Very fast. pretty fast, and a good way of kind of doing cross sections to create geometry in Fusion. So I don't think I see any other questions from people, so that will probably be it for this month. But I really appreciate everybody, Juliana and others who joined. Actually, Eric and Fred and all of the people who joined in person. I really, really appreciate that you did so. And for anybody who is looking at this in replay, then thank you very much as well. And I will see you next month in the new year. Talk to you later. Again, this is Nick Klosky. Thank you, Eric. Thank you. All right, bye-bye.